Also, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org. The time is 3 p.m. Stay tuned for Cover to Cover with Jack Foley.
This is indeed Jack Foley. Thank you, Wesley. And my guest today is Mel Vapour. And Mel Vapour, V-A-P-O-U-R, is the general manager and the vice president of the East Bay Media Center. He's partnered with that with Paul. Give me his middle name.
Kealoha.
My Hawaiian is just terrible. I'm sorry. Forgive me, Paul. Paul Kealoha Blake. And I should be able to say that. That's a good name. I'll practice. Anyway, Mel, welcome to the show. And we're going to talk about...
Thank you, Jack.
Pleasure
to be here.
Pleasure to have you. We're going to talk about a number of things, but one of the things we particularly want to talk about are 3 films by Nick Saunders. And Nick Saunders is a British filmmaker who makes American movies. And they're wonderful films, very, very interesting intersection of a kind of consciousness that is very interested in certain deep American modes. The 3 films are called Curses and Sermons, which is based on writing by Michael McClure, At Apollinaire's Grave, which is based on writing by Allen Ginsberg, and One Night at the Aristo, which is based on writing by William Burroughs. And I've actually presented stuff about all 3 of those films at another time, but right now you can see all 3 of them on the 21st at 1939 Addison Street in downtown Berkeley, which is where the East Bay Media Center is located. They will be going on at 7:15 p.m. They're very, very worth seeing. It's not that easy to get a hold of them, and they're extraordinary films. I'll perhaps detail you a little bit more about some of what's happening there. But they're marvelous films, and Mel is here partly to tell us a little bit about that, about the East Bay Media Center, and about all sorts of other things. And also another film which is happening, which is called Cambodian Sun. And when is that? That's the 17th of April.
That's tomorrow night.
That's tomorrow night. That's Thursday night. Okay.
We have actually 2 screenings, one in the afternoon at 3:30, and then an evening screening at 6:30. And the director will be in and is available for a Q&A afterwards. It should be a really interesting event.
Tell me a little bit about that before we get to the Nick Saunders films.
The Cambodian Sun is an amazing piece, and the story basically is about this poet, Kosel Kib, and who spent some time in federal prison and was deported out of the U.S. and basically had to go back to his native land, Cambodia. And
Is he in the film?
He's in the film, yes. And it's sort of transformative because he's basically a poet now, okay? And so the amazing thing about it is the filmmaker Masahiro Shigano has made this incredible document of his work and his life. And I really urge people to come out and see it. There are a few seats left. The 6:30 screening is almost sold out, so I would recommend people to get their tickets ASAP.
Okay, and how do they do that?
They can do it at the box office. They can come to East Bay Media Center. They can purchase them online as well.
And how do they do online, and what's the phone number?
510-843-3699, and they can go to the East Bay Media Center website, which is eastbaymediacenter.org, and go to the PayPal button and press it and place their order.
It sounds like a wonderful film and a wonderfully interesting film. Is the director himself Cambodian, or is he Japanese? The
Japanese.
name sounds Japanese.
And he will be in, and he will also be doing a Q&A.
Wonderful. And the poet's not going to be there?
No.
Is this one of the reasons he had to go to Cambodia? Can't show up for the film. But that sounds wonderful. It sounds like a very interesting film and something relevant to Poetry Month, which, of course, is what we're in the middle of here in April. And the intersection of poetry and film is one of the things that's of considerable interest in the work of Nick Saunders. Nick Saunders takes poems and makes films out of a kind of, what can I call it, a kind of collision. The films are not an attempt, the poem is often in the film, but the films are not an attempt to present the poem, the reading of the poem, or something like that. It's an attempt to make a kind of encounter between the filmmaker and the work. I said this about one night at the Aristo, which is about a Burroughs story. It's not a poet, but, well, he wrote some poems, but it's a William Burroughs story, which was an extraordinary story. It was called The Finger, and it's in Burroughs' collection, Interzone, and he cut off part of his finger and gave it to his lover. It was kind of his version of Van Gogh and his ear. And I wrote this. The Aristo is the name of the hotel where the hero of the film chops off his finger. It's not so much a version of William Burroughs' story as it is an imaginative interchange in which elements of Burroughs' piece mingle with elements of Saunders' filmmaking. It's an open field in which a kind of poetic creativity can happen. It's neither wholly Burroughs nor wholly Saunders, but a fascinating picture book of one man's psyche as it encounters another. It is an extraordinary in-between which holds our attention as it whirls between fantasy and reality, film and writing, truth and fiction. It is noir, except when it isn't. Anyway, all of the films have that kind of quality of an intersection between the filmmaker's consciousness and the work itself. And so it's a deepening both of his own awareness and a deepening of our awareness of the content of the poem, or the story in this case, that he's presenting. Would you say it's a fairly fair description of what Nick is doing?
I think it's a brilliant description.
Oh, thank you.
I'm humbled and honored by your description.
I just gave him a couple of bucks. You understand?
There's a definitive quality about Nick's work that McClure brought to my attention, Michael McClure, that is, when we did the world premiere, United States premiere of Curses and Sermons. And
which in McClure, of course, was Sermons and Curses.
Exactly, right. That's the creative freedom that Saunders takes with all of his films. And the amazing thing about Saunders is he's very disciplined and utilizes a simplistic approach at cinematography. That is not to say that his films aren't complex, that they're not well produced. They're extremely well produced. And Curses and Sermons, I think, is one of his more fantastic films in terms of lighting, staging, and epiphany. It's
his homage to the American Western, not just the American West, but the American Western.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
For a Brit, he is really into the essence of American cinematography. It's phenomenal. And that opened my eyes up to his work, and have been a fan of his ever since. And we have done all of his films at the Berkeley Video and Film Festival, and have premiered them in the United States. And we feel really gratified that he's apparently back in the States shooting the fourth film in this series.
This was to be a tetralogy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's made three. The three films that he's made are Curses and Sermons, as Mel mentioned, which was 2009, At Apollinaire's Grave, which is 2011, and then One Night at the Aristo, which is 2013. So it's every couple of years. I guess we'll expect one in 2015.
Exactly.
This
next
one,
year.
he's down in, or not up in, but down in Big Sur, filming and putting together a film even as we speak.
And that's really exciting because he'll be up in Berkeley for the event on Monday, April 21st at 7:15 is when the three films will screen, and will be available for a Q&A afterwards. So this is a very unique opportunity for people to come out and see a phenomenal independent filmmaker who's producing these pretty much on his own. And you'll also have an option to meet some of the cast. I believe Phil Bulcock is in the States as well, and Nick will be doing a Q&A afterwards, and you can meet and greet this great young independent filmmaker.
He's also an extremely intelligent man who has a lot to say about why he's doing what he's doing, and where it comes from. I've talked to him at some length about his sources and various things like that. He's very, very articulate, and so you'll learn something about filmmaking from him. He knows all about American film, and there's all kinds of stuff. There are references, actually, in one night at the Aristo. Some of you may know the famous lines in Casablanca when Humphrey Bogart is asked, why did you come to Casablanca? And Bogart says, I came to Casablanca for the waters. And the person asking him says, waters? There are no waters in Casablanca. It's a desert. Bogart said, I was misinformed. Anyway, that exchange shows up in One Night at the Aristo. For those people who are interested in film, there are other kinds of film fan stuff that he puts into the film, which that's not the only thing about them, but he's so schooled. He's like, Scorsese or someone like that. He's so skilled and so schooled in film that these kinds of things naturally happen in a film of Nick's. And he can talk about them, too.
If you were pressed, what of the three films is your favorite? I'm
not a big one on doing that. What I really
come on, Jack.
I don't believe in the Oscars either. All of that's you know what I think the best is. I think that comes out of Christianity. I think it's the blessed. That's the saints. These are the ones who count, baby. And I think that all three films have great strengths. I love all three. And what I'd rather have is an opportunity to let those three films dance together and resonate against one another, bounce off against one another. So I don't want to say one of them is better than the other, but it's a wonderful opportunity that you're providing to see all three together, because they're all short. I mean, there's something like a half hour, a little more than a half hour, that kind of thing. But to see the three films together gives you a sense of the richness. And he's planning at some point or another to make the tetralogy into one large film, which will be an extraordinary experience, absolutely, I am sure. So that this is a kind of almost a preview of what that kind of experience will be. So it's a wonderful thing that you're doing in presenting all three. And they're very rich, and they have certain elements that are the same, but also certain elements that differ extraordinarily. And they're all homages to the past in certain ways, but they're all different kinds of homages and different parts of the past, and at the same time in a medium that Nick has mastered and which isn't anything like the past at all.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. So I'm very happy about that, but I don't want to choose one. I will read you a little bit. I want to talk to you about the East Bay Media Center too, Mel, but I'll read you a little bit about what I had to say. One of the things I wrote about the McClure film, Curses and Sermons, I quoted McClure, "Is this my brain? Jesus, I'm sick of the spiritual warfare." Michael McClure wrote that in 1970. Saunders was right to call the film Curses and Sermons. It's a better film title than Sermons and Curses. But in doing so, he loses the implication present in McClure's title that sermons are answered by curses. In Saunders' version, curses are answered by sermons. Nonetheless, Curses and Sermons has enough cursing and sermonizing to satisfy any McClure aficionado. And some of the things I said about the film as a whole, because it's at the very end, it's Billy the Kid and Jean Harlow, very familiar creatures, characters from McClure's work, and he sees them as connecting as opposites and as in certain ways the same in all sorts of ways. They meet somewhere in eternity, in heaven or someplace. And Saunders has at the end of the film, Saunders has Harlow dig a grave, just as Billy the Kid did at the beginning of the film. And what she's burying is the kid's former self, though that only becomes clear later as you contemplate the film. Perhaps the film's most stunning single sequence is the scene in which the lovers first attempt to make love. The beginning of the film is deliberately dark, lit primarily by sudden flashes of fire. hell. In the lovemaking scene, on the other hand, color is everywhere, but it turns into strange, vibrant, violent color. The name of Saunders' production company is 14167. The numbers refer to the date, January 14th, 1967, of the human being and gathering of all the tribes in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Participants in that august event included Michael McClure, Gary Snyder, Allen Ginsberg, and Lenore Kandel, author of The Love Book. McClure read one poem and sang another to the accompaniment of an autoharp, a Zimmerman, given to him by Bob Dylan. To speed the awakening of consciousness, Gary Snyder urged those prepared to rebel against the dominant values of United States society to take LSD. As the Jefferson Airplane played, approximately 20,000 people took LSD or smoked marijuana. An amazing moment. Excuse me. In the initial lovemaking scene, something like that happens to Saunders' movie, which the filmmaker accurately described as an acid western. We are in the midst of what should be an ecstatic moment, but the kid is still hostile, angry. Demons begin to attack Harlow. The kid's expression is not tender but vicious, and instead of offering her a flower, he offers her a deadly scorpion. It's here that the film's color changes. It's no longer dark, but it's as if we are seeing its color negative. Clearly, at this point, Harlow is experiencing a bad trip. The effect is psychedelic, as if a Haight-Ashbury poster were to come suddenly to life. The entire scene resembles an oracle cover. Moments later, however, again in the dark, the lovers are able to achieve a more authentic encounter. Once again, the light changes. This time into a white brightness, which culminates with the appearance of flower-like dots of color. Once again, like a Haight-Ashbury poster, the film is still a recitation of McClure's poem and a love story. But at this point, it's also a deliberate evocation of an entire era. Curses and Sermons is a wonderful tribute to Michael McClure, to the 60s, and to an American movie genre that Saunders rightly sees as a perfect embodiment of a classic beatnik poem. Most importantly, the film looks great and has wonderful performances by British actors who sound as American as apple pie. Sometimes we need people from other countries to tell us the truth about ourselves, to give us hope.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. And that's just a little bit, a hint of what you can get from Curses and Sermons. It's a wonderful film. And that's only one of the three. I mean, there's stuff about the others that I've written as well, and we'll perhaps talk a little bit about that. But they're all worth seeing for the richness of the consciousness of this filmmaker. It's a really extraordinary experience to see these three beat films of a very different kind from one another. I mean, Burroughs, McClure, Ginsberg, they're wildly different people. And yet, Nick encounters each of them in a different way and makes something that expresses himself as well as their work. Now, Mel, tell me, we're beginning to move towards the end of the show. We have only about 10 minutes left. So I want to hear more about your experience with the East Bay Media Center, which is a remarkable institution. Tell us something about that. It began when?
In 1980, we formed as Grassroots Video to create a low-power television station here in Berkeley, and spent 3 years at that task, doing terrestrial interference studies with the FCC, raising funds, and putting a lot of effort into it, only to be shot down by the FCC and the powers that be. The center then became what was known as, and is known today as, East Bay Media Center in 1983, with a name change and a whole new restructuring of the board of directors and the direction of East Bay Media Center. In 84 and 5, having an insight into a whole new revolution that was developing in technology in terms of video production, which was the advent of the introduction of the personal computer and the camcorder into production. The media center then went into a more of our participatory sport with the making of video.
You were teaching people to use this technology.
Absolutely. We decided on a series of formats, VHS and Super VHS, which were applicable and affordable for people to produce in. And we provided renting of equipment, camcorders, microphones, and we also created 7 different editing suites. We were also on the forefront of introducing the video toaster workstations, working with NewTek, and creating beta workshops with developers that were creating synthesis between video and computer technology. And as that evolved, we trained probably over 3,000 or 4,000 people in video production and more importantly, post-production, in analog post-production. And
movies come out of the, out of the editing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only movies, but documentaries, public service announcements. We had created numerous cable TV shows that we put on Peralta TV. We were advocates starting in 1986 with Berkeley City Council to create the first public access television station here in Berkeley with then former Mayor Gus Newport and that regime, and we advocated for that for many, many years. We also created shows like Barrier Free TV, which was one of the very first shows in the country.
That was your baby, basically.
That was our baby, and we did, this was by and for people with physical disabilities.
Yes.
And that spawned many independent producers like the late, great Cheryl Marie Wade, Pam Walker, and great producers like that.
And both you and Paul Kealoha Blake are filmmakers. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Sorry for the gaffe earlier, Paul. But you're both filmmakers, too. And but you put aside your own work to a large degree, I believe, in order to be able to do what you've been doing at the Media Center.
We did. My background goes back to 64, 5, and 6, with several 16-millimeter films that I produced. Several were in the very first independent film festival in the United States, which is the Ann Arbor Film Festival. Had a few awards and then moved on to other components. And, the work that we've done, both Paul and I, in the 80s and 90s, was more documentary oriented, and also providing other producers with a vehicle in which they could produce their own works. And part of that was the inception of the Berkeley Video and Film Festival in 1991, which allowed independent producers, a lot of media center producers on a regional level to get their works out. And we screened them the very first year at the Florence Schwimley Theater, and the festival now, I believe, is in its 23rd year. And the changes, we probably have screened be 4,000 to 5,000 different films over that time, and we've been at every theater that stands and doesn't stand to this day.
And have you gotten considerable support from PBS? A loaded question.
Yes. I think it's known as the living room fracas, is what you're referring to. You can fan the fires, Jack. We tried to basically put together a compendium of some of the wonderful producers at the Media Center with reference to the living room fracas, and only to have found that PBS intervened and censored us on numerous occasions, and also made it impossible for us to continue to work with PBS on that level, which actually in many respects, gave us more of a vision as to what the Berkeley Video and Film Festival could be. And during that evolution over the last 23 years or so, we're showing works like Curses and Sermons. The festival has expanded onto an international level. And as I mentioned, that there were numerous theaters like Shattuck Cinemas, the Oaks, Fine Arts Theater. We've screened at every theater. I think that what has manifested at East Bay Media Center today in 2014 is the creation of what we call the East Bay Media Center's performance space. We now are screening the Berkeley Film Festival at our facility.
When did that start?
It started last year with... it was spawned over a conflict that we had with the Shattuck Cinemas, and the outcome of that has been back to our roots, which is independent cinema. We're supporting ourselves. We're no longer supporting Hollywood. One approach with screening our independent filmmakers at Landmark and other first-run theaters was to basically put independent filmmakers in the mainstream with first-run films from Hollywood. And I feel that after 20-some years, we've accomplished that goal.
We've seen so many films at your festivals, et cetera, that have been wonderful, and you don't see them anywhere else. And one of the interesting things, too, though, of course, is that a person associated with you is the late Alan Willis. And he was, of course, associated with KQED. You had problems with PBS, but he was associated with KQED. And he did some marvelous work. He did documentaries about all kinds of things, etc. And he was a great supporter of your organization.
Thank you for mentioning Alan. He was a very, very good friend, backer, supporter of the East Bay Media Center. We met him in '86, right as he retired from KQED. I'd like to also say that he donated his film collection to East Bay Media Center.
Oh, did he? Wow.
And with an assignment of rights, he's done wonderful films in the past. And
he would make films at exactly the moment when the issues of the film were happening. These are not, this happened 10 years ago and let's examine it. This is happening right now.
Absolutely.
He made Stagger Lee in 1970 about Bobby Seale.
That's an incredible film.
It's an incredible film, yeah, exactly.
It was shot exclusively at the San Francisco County Jail.
Yes, exactly.
And Bobby was...
and he talks about himself. He talks about his life in it. It's an amazing film.
It is an amazing film. It's very humorous, too. Bobby does have sort of a charlatan side to him. And the other great films that he's done... are in our archives. You can go to the Alan Willis archive page and
on your website. And give
the
website again, please.
EastBayMediaCenter.org.
Okay, EastBayMediaCenter.org. And also give the phone number. Because we're just running out of time here. We're about to end the show. Now, there are two things we're talking about, basically, two shows that are happening. There's many, many other things that happen at the East Bay Media Center, but we're talking about Cambodian Sun, which is Thursday, April 17th, coming right up, 3:30 and 5:30. And
6:30.
6:30? Oh, it's 5:30 on this. I'm sorry. 6:30. And that's with the filmmaker. That should be a fascinating film. And, of course, we've been mainly talking about the films that you can see on the 21st, and that's at 7:15. And they are the 3 Beat films by Nick Saunders. And they're wonderful films. You can see One Night at the Aristo. You can see At Apollinaire's Grave. And, of course, the one I read something about, Curses and Sermons. They're well worth your time. Mel Vapour, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Jack. And I wanted to give the phone number as per your request. It's 510-843-3699. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you here, Jack.
Not as much of a pleasure as it is to come to your screenings. He does wonderful things. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
The New Living Expo makes its debut at the San Mateo Event Center April 25th through 27th. The expo is a benefit for Sunrise Center and features over 200 exhibitors, more than 100 highly respected speakers, featuring Marianne Williamson, Dick Gregory, Rianne Eisler, Ken Wilber, Daniel Brinkley, Lynn Andrews, Laura Eisenhower, Master